I nursed my dying mother on her deathbed for years. But then I read her will and realized she left everything to the man who ruined our lives. Every morning for the past 6 years began the same way. The sharp scent of rubbing alcohol, the quiet beep of the oxygen machine, and my mother's pale hand gripping mine. I was 21 when her illness took a turn for the worst, when the doctor said she had maybe 6 months left. But she survived longer than any of them expected. She fought for every breath, and I fought beside her. That fight became my whole life. I gave up my job, dropped out of university. My dreams of studying architecture abroad turned to dust, replaced by prescriptions, 4 bags, sponge baths, and endless bills. My friends drifted away. My world shrunk down to a single bedroom, hers. I slept on the floor for years. Sometimes on a folded blanket, sometimes just the carpet. I learned to recognize every flicker in her eyes. Pain, relief, fear. But I never saw regret. She never once said she wished I lived my life instead. Because she believed I was doing the right thing. And so did I. After all, she had done everything for me. She raised me on her own. She worked night shifts at 2 diners to put food on the table. She kept a roof over our heads, even when it leaked. And she made one thing very clear, from the day I was old enough to understand language. My father was a monster. A manipulative, violent, selfish man who nearly destroyed both of us. She said he bruised her body and shattered her spirit. That he screamed until the walls shook. That he took everything, her peace, her savings, even her name. He turned her into someone she didn't recognize. And when she found out she was pregnant with me, she knew she had to escape. She said she left in the middle of the night, threw her phone in the river, changed our names, started over. I never asked for more details, never questioned her. I loved her too much to doubt her, and hated him too much to care. She gave me a name, Ethan Reed, and nothing else. Just a promise, never look for him. Never let him find you. He doesn't deserve a second chance. And I made that promise. I made it 1,000 times over. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It was a rainy Thursday morning when she passed. Her hand was cold in mine. Her breathing had slowed overnight, so I had already said my goodbyes. But just before dawn, her eyes opened, wide, terrified, almost like she saw a ghost. She whispered something I'll never forget. Don't let him take everything again. I thought she meant her illness, her life, or maybe even the house. I was wrong. The funeral was small. Just me, a few distant friends from her diner days, and a hospice nurse who cried harder than I did. The priest said kind things. I barely heard them. My body was there, but my mind wasn't. I had just lost the only person I'd ever called family. But the real blow didn't come until 3 days later, when the lawyer handed me the will. I expected it to be simple. She didn't own much. The house, a savings account, a few personal belongings. I expected her to leave it all to me. But she didn't. I sat across from the attorney, still wearing black, my hands shaking as I flipped through the document. And then I saw it. In cold legal print. To Ethan Reed, I leave the entirety of my estate. My world stopped. The man she said ruined her life. The man she told me to fear. The man she made me swear to avoid. She left everything. To him. My breath caught in my throat. This had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Or someone else with the same name. But it wasn't. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, she amended her will just 5 weeks before her death. She was very specific. 5 weeks. While I was spoon-feeding her soup. While I was bathing her. Changing her sheets. While I was begging her to hang on just a little longer. She was giving everything. Everything I gave up my life to protect, to the one man who was never supposed to come back. And I had no idea why. The liar's words echoed in my ears long after I left his office. She left everything to Mr. Ethan Reed. I didn't even remember walking home. I don't know how I crossed streets, opened doors, or climbed stairs. My legs moved on autopilot, but my brain, my heart, was frozen. How could she? How could the woman I gave up my life for give everything to the man who was supposed to have ruined hers? I dropped the legal folder on the kitchen table. Her tea mug was still there from 3 nights ago. Still half full. Still stained with the same honey she'd used since I was a child. I stared at it, wishing it would answer me. I had spent years fighting her pain, her tears, her past. I sacrificed everything, and now it felt like I was just a witness to a story I was never actually part of. And worst of all, I didn't even know who she really was. I went into her bedroom. The air still smelled faintly like lavender lotion and cough syrup. Her pillow had an indent where her head used to rest. I sat beside it, staring at the floor where I used to sleep, the same floor I laid on night after night when I stayed up monitoring her oxygen machine, reading pharmacy labels, praying she wouldn't choke in her sleep. That's when I noticed something new. A metal lockbox under her bed. It hadn't been there before, or if it had, I had been too tired, too blind, or too trusting to notice. There was a key taped under the headboard, almost like she wanted it to be found. I opened the box and found truth. Letters. Dozens of them. Yellowed with time, dated over the past 10 years. And photos. One photo caught my eye, me, as a baby, cradled in a man's arms. He had soft eyes. A camera strap hung from his neck. He was smiling like he knew happiness, like he was proud. On the back of the photo, my mother had written, "You're a good father. I wish he could remember this one day." My breath caught. I dug through the letters and read the one dated just 6 months ago. Her handwriting was shaky. "Ethan, I still don't know how to explain it to him. How do you tell a son that the monster you made him fear was a man who only ever wanted to be there? I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I let my illness convince me you were dangerous. I thought I was protecting him, but I was protecting myself from my guilt." I dropped the letter. My hands were shaking. My entire life was a lie. The man I was raised to hate wasn't a monster. He was a victim. And she knew. She had known for years. And she never told me. Every story, every whispered warning, every bedtime tear she wiped away while talking about the man who nearly killed us was a fragment of her own fear, not fact. I felt sick, my stomach twisted, my throat burned. All those years. I blamed someone I never met. I refused to ask questions. I believed everything she said because how could I not? She was my mother. She was all I had. I reread her final note. "If I don't make it, please don't let him carry this shame forever. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I tried." But she hadn't told me anything. She left me with pain, confusion, betrayal, and a house I was apparently now squatting in, because legally, it wasn't even mine. It was his. I looked at the walls, at the pictures, at the memories we built in this space, and I suddenly felt like a stranger in my own life. How many times had I judged fathers who abandoned their children without knowing my own father had been taken from me? Not by courts, not by death, but by fear, by my mother's breakdown, by choices she regretted too late. Was Ethan even still alive? Was he already coming here? Did he know about me? I pulled out my phone and typed his name into Google. Ethan Reed, architect, New York. First result, a gray-haired man giving a TED Talk on sustainable design. Second result, a company website, Reed and Stone Designs. I clicked, and there he was. Older now, but the same eyes, the same smile, the same man holding baby me in that photo. He had built a life, a company, a legacy. And now, thanks to her will, he would inherit everything she had left behind, including me. And I had no idea what I was supposed to do with that. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat the next day. I just sat in the living room my mother decorated, in the house I sacrificed everything to preserve, drowning in a silence louder than any scream. The documents still lay open on the kitchen table. The will, the name, Ethan Reed. It stared back at me like a ghost. I thought about burning it, thought about tearing it up and pretending none of it was real. But even fire couldn't erase what I now knew. My mother lied to me. Not once. Not by accident, but for decades. She poisoned my view of a man who, by every other account, had done nothing wrong but exist in the shadow of her mental illness. I had fought her war. Blindly. And now I didn't even know whose side I'd been on. Around noon, I opened the fridge, took out the milk, then put it back. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else. The kind of detached floating you feel when you're in shock, or grieving the truth after already grieving the person. I picked up the envelope with the contact details the lawyer had given me, a formal notification for Mr. Ethan Reed. There was a phone number at the bottom. I stared at it for hours. Should I call him? Should I scream at him? Apologize? Ask for answers? Demand them? I dialed once. Hung up before the first ring. I didn't know what I wanted from him. Forgiveness? Clarity? A father? The idea felt foreign. I didn't even know what it meant to have one. So instead, I drove. I drove out of town, up the cliffs near Bridgeport, the place Mom always said was too far, too cold. We'd only gone there once, when I was 7. But now I understood. That was where the cabin was, the one in the photograph. I don't even remember the turns, the signs. Just the gravel road crunching under my tires and a strange ache in my chest. And then I saw it. A weathered wooden cabin. Small porch. Wind chimes that still moved in the breeze. Abandoned, but standing. I broke the lock on the door and stepped inside. It smelled like dust, like memory. Like something left behind. In the fireplace were ashes, old ones, and a half-burned photo frame. I brushed away the soot. It was us. Him. Her. Me. Frozen in a moment I didn't remember, but suddenly needed. Why had she left this place behind? Why had she kept it a secret? Because it proved too much. That she had been happy with him. That there was a time when we were a family. And maybe that was what destroyed her the most. I stayed in that cabin until sundown. Didn't say a word. Just let the silence tell me what she never could. When I got home, the answering machine blinked. One new message. I pressed play. A man's voice. Careful. Cautious. Deep. This is Ethan Reed. I received a call from your attorney's office regarding Lorraine. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. I'd like to talk, if you're willing. I froze. My mother was Lorraine. I didn't even know her full name until now. The voice continued. You probably don't want to hear from me. I understand. But I never stopped hoping I would hear yours. One day. Click. I stood there in the dark, phone in hand, shaking. He didn't sound angry. Or bitter. Just broken. Like someone who had waited too long for a moment that would never come the way he imagined. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the only one grieving her. He had lost her too, twice. Once when she ran. And now again, when she left him behind. But me? I had lost everything. My mother. My innocence, my sense of truth. And the man I could have known. If she had just told me the truth sooner. The next day, I called him. My fingers hesitated before the last digit. I think I was afraid of what I'd hear, or worse, what I wouldn't feel. But I pressed it anyway. He answered on the second ring. Hello? Silence. I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. My chest ached with the weight of unspoken years. Then I finally whispered, I think I'm your son. The line went quiet. And then, a trembling breath. I know, he said softly. I've always known. I think I'm your son. I know, he said softly. I've always known. We sat in silence for a few seconds, maybe minutes. Time stopped making sense once the foundation of my life cracked. I could hear the emotion in his voice, like he had been holding that sentence in for over 2 decades. But it didn't comfort me. It made me furious. You knew? I snapped. You knew where I was this whole time? I knew she had you, he replied quietly. and I respected her wishes. For years, I didn't want to make things worse. I stood up and began pacing my room. You respected her wishes? The same woman who told me you were abusive? That you hurt her? That you were the reason we ran? I never laid a hand on her, he said immediately. Not once. His tone changed, sharper, firmer, not angry, but pained. She was sick, son. She was undiagnosed for years. I begged her to get help. I was there when the doctors first started testing medications. I tried everything. But eventually, she convinced herself that I was the danger. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He continued. When she disappeared, I thought she was dead. Until I got a letter. No return address. Just a photo of you, 10 years old. After that, every few years, she'd write. Not often. Not clearly. But enough to tell me you were alive, you were growing. That you hated me. She told me to stay away. That it was for your protection. I closed my eyes. Everything hurt. You didn't fight for me, I whispered. He exhaled slowly. I did. At first. I hired private investigators. I filed missing persons reports. But she was smart. Careful. She changed her name. Yours too. I didn't want to drag you through a custody war, not if it meant traumatizing you more. Silence again. Then he added something that shook me to my core. I kept the cabin untouched, just in case you ever found your way back. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The next few days, I didn't return his calls. I couldn't. I was lost in the space between grief and fury, memory and confusion. I visited the bank, the insurance office, even the courthouse. I needed to see everything for myself. It was all real. Everything my mother owned, the house, the savings, the life I sacrificed my future for, was now legally his. I was a guest in a home I thought I'd die in. And I wanted it back. But not with blood. With truth. So I started planning. First, I gathered everything. Letters. Photos. Legal proof. Audio messages from the lawyer. Her medical history. Her prescription records. I scanned them, organized them, built a digital folder labeled The Real Story. Then, I sent an email. to ethan.reed@reedstonedesigns.com. Subject: You said you always knew. Let's make sure the world does too. Inside was the full archive, every lie she told me, every truth she kept from him, and most importantly, the emotional cost both of us paid because of her silence. Then I wrote one line. You inherited everything but me. Let's see what it's worth. That same evening, I called a local reporter. Not a trashy tabloid, not a gossip blogger, a serious, award-winning journalist who specialized in truths buried by family. I gave her everything. She called it The Lie That Stole a Son. It published a week later. Front page. Full spread. National pickup. The headline: Son discovers dying mother lied for 25 years. She turned my father into a monster I never met. Within 2 days, his firm's inbox was flooded. Some praised him. Some accused him. Some blamed my mother. But the story went viral, and now the world knew. Not just about what happened, but about me. He called. Multiple times. I didn't pick up. He emailed. I didn't answer. He showed up. I watched from behind the curtains. Then one night, I opened the door. He looked older than before. Smaller. Tired. But still steady. Why are you doing this? He asked. I stared at him. Because I spent my life living in her story. Now I'm writing mine. He nodded. Said nothing, just stood there. Then, I handed him a final envelope. One I'd prepared for days. Inside, a legally binding agreement. Full transfer of estate ownership from Ethan Reed to his son. There was no demand. No threat. Just facts. I told him, publicly, the story was mine. Legally, it could still be his. But ethically? This house, this life. He didn't earn it. I did. I took care of her. I said, voice shaking. While you lived your life, built your company, gave TED Talks. I gave everything. I know, he whispered. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to let me breathe. He nodded and signed. Right there. Without a lawyer. Without a word. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years. Not because I had money or the house, but because I had taken back control of the story that tried to erase me. For the first time in 6 years, the house felt like mine. Not hers. Not his. Mine. The silence was no longer haunting, it was healing. The floors I once paced in agony now carried me with a quiet strength. The kitchen table, where I first read the will, had been cleared. Clean. Just like the chapters I thought I had closed. I began restoring the place. Room by room. Not to erase her, but to remove the weight of what she'd hidden. Her photos still hung on the hallway walls, but now beside the real ones, the ones of her with him. Of our family, before everything cracked. For a few weeks, it felt like peace. Ethan stayed away. He sent one email, short, respectful. You were right. You earned every inch of that home. I'll keep my distance. But if you ever want the truth from my side, it's yours. I didn't reply. I didn't need more truth. I had my version now, and it was enough. Or so I thought. It was late one night when I found it. I had gone back to the cabin, this time not out of grief, but curiosity. I wanted to see if there was anything I had missed. Some last piece of her that hadn't been tainted by the weight of her lies. In the attic was a rusted trunk. Old, padlocked. I cracked it open with a crowbar. Inside, a tape recorder. One of those old-school handheld ones. And a few labeled cassettes in a small wooden box. Each one was dated. Each one marked therapy a private. My stomach dropped. I hadn't known she recorded her sessions. I played the first one. He's kind to me. Gentle. But that's what makes it scarier. Because what if it's all an act? The second one. I know I sound paranoid, but he's always watching me. I found the door unlocked last night. I'm sure I locked it. And the third. My therapist says it might be a trauma response. But what if I'm right? What if Ethan isn't who he says he is? I sat down. Froze. These weren't the words of a stable woman. But they weren't fully delusional either. They were fractured. Torn between reality and something darker. Then I reached the final tape. It was marked. Do not destroy. I pressed play. My mother's voice, older now. Shaky. Closer to the version I remembered. If he ever hears this, I'm sorry. For everything. For what I said. What I did. I wish I could have trusted you. But I still don't know if I was wrong. Maybe you were dangerous. Maybe I was sick. Maybe both. But the worst thing I ever did wasn't leaving. Pause. A deep breath. It was letting you believe you were innocent. My blood ran cold. I told him you were a monster. But I never told him about the night it all ended. The night you pushed me. The stairs. The hospital. The broken rib. The restraining order that never processed. I destroyed the file. Told him it was paranoia. But part of me still wonders. I dropped the recorder. What the hell had I just heard? She hadn't imagined everything. There was a moment, a violent one. Something real. And she buried it. Not just from me. From herself. Suddenly, the victory felt hollow. My revenge? Built on a version of the story that was never whole. Maybe she had lied. But maybe so had he, by omission. By silence. By letting me take control of the narrative while he quietly watched from the sidelines. He signed over the house because it looked noble. But what if it was guilt? What if he was protecting himself again? I thought about confronting him. About sending the audio. Digging deeper. Filing FOIAs, reopening old court files. But I stopped. Because the real revenge was letting them live with what they did. Letting their truths rot between the cracks they created. letting both versions of the story exist, but choosing neither. I wasn't their son anymore. I was mine. I buried the tapes, burned the last one, and walked out of that cabin, letting the smoke curl into the sky like a question that would never be answered. Because in the end, revenge isn't about truth. It's about freedom from the people who stole it from you.